Well, actually, what we're doing, you see what we're doing, we continue on from a week ago.
First fruits.
The first fruits, because remember, this is still part of the festival season that they were studying. So basically, we're studying now is the Festival of Trumpets, and we'll look into it in further detail and we'll get to look through it. The title of this lesson is what?
Remembering with joy. Remembering with joy.
Okay, remembering with joy. And so, and why we can remember with joy is because if you look at what the scripture is we're studying, it really is about three things. It's about rest, restoration, and restoration and something else I can think of right now. but it's about, if you look at, because that's what you're doing, what you're seeing in this passage of scripture, that is giving rest and restoration not only to the land, but to the people. And also to be obedient to God's command, to remember that the land belongs to the Lord. And because when it's said and done is that he always reminds them that you need to remember that everything that you have, you didn't get by yourself.
Amen.
You didn't get on your own. You got through my means and through my blessings. And he reminds them that the land is not their land. And you know, and unfortunately, that's not just for the land. That's a hard lesson for all of us to learn, is that everything that we have is not our own. Even though we claim it as our own, and we think it's our own, and we use it for our own selves most of the time, God, you know, has always made clear in His Word that His blessings are for us to share with others. You know, that the rest of the world, those that are less fortunate than we are, just to be blessed by all the excess that we have. And as you can see, that what happens is even here during this time, when the time came for Jubilee, all the people that had everything, they had all their goods, the haves and that first the have-nots, they were reluctant to give it back because of the financial constraints they had found themselves in, the luxury it provides, and all the benefits it provides, and everything else. So therefore, they were reluctant. And according to historians, they said they don't ever know a real time that's recorded in Scripture that Israel really kept Jubilee. It was ordained by God. And even though, if you remember, when Jesus Christ came to the temple in Luke 4, he announced the year of Jubilee. There was an actual year of Jubilee during that time. But then again, as we know, Jesus is our Jubilee, because He says, "Come to me, who all you that are
heavy laden,
and
I will give you rest.
And I will give you rest. My yoke is what?
Easy, and my burden
is light." So He is our Jubilee. And of course, remember all these things, as I said to you before, all these pictures and all these festivals are pictures of Christ. It point toward the real thing, which came later. So we're going to look at Jubilee, but also look at not just Jubilee itself, because Jubilee is actually, the 50th year, which is today is our 50th day, right?
Yes.
Of post-resurrection. So this is a Jubilee day for us, if we commemorate that. But at any rate, more than Jubilee, God had commanded them to not only just to remember Jubilee, but to remember those things that led up to Jubilee. To remember every Sabbath. God has always declared the Sabbath rest for His people. And if you remember when we said it a few months ago, the lessons where Israel was in captivity and in punishment, He always reminded them why they were in captivity. One of the reasons why was because they failed to keep His Sabbaths. And remember they were in captivity for 70 years, and it was a year for each one of those Sabbaths rest that they had failed to keep until it was fulfilled. and the point is that He tells them, even after they went to Babylon, and even when the Assyrians conquered them, they still failed when they came back. Even in Ezra and Nehemiah, for a while they talk about it, as we do. We get those moments of whatever you want to call it. I won't say revival, because revival leads to real change. But those moments of something, whatever you want to call it, where we get a little bit of contrition in our heart. I guess it's contrition. I don't know if it's contrition, but all of it's attrition versus contrition. We get something in our heart. We do right for half a day anyway. And then we revert back to what's so natural for us to do is to be selfish and stingy, and to think that we are our own creator or our own own self-sustaining, should I say. Okay, enough of that. So, looking at Jubilee, if you remember, when we said it some time ago, we were talking about the sacrifice for the Passover. And we talked about in that 16th, I think it's the 16th chapter or 13th chapter of Leviticus. I'll look back at it and see what it is. It's one of the, I think the 16th chapter of Leviticus. Where when Moses and Aaron, God had told Aaron, God had told Moses to Aaron and the priests, the other boys, how they were to do the sacrifices and everything. And they chose two lambs. Mm-hmm. They chose one for Azazel and they chose one for God. And the one that was offered for sin offering for the priests and their sins. Mm-hmm. And then the other was for the people, remember. Mm-hmm. And remember when they got ready for the scapegoat, they had to cast lots. They cast lots, and the scapegoat was the one that was taking the burden away from the people out into the wilderness. But the other one was sacrificed to God for their sins. So, the reason I'm saying this to you is because it was during that time, if you remember now, what does Jubilee mean? First off, what is Jubilee? What is Jubilee?
Celebration.
Of what?
Jubilee comes from a Hebrew word that means a joyful shout or clangor of trumpets. I looked that up a while ago.
Okay. Okay. Jubilee comes from the word actually means ram's horn.
Oh yeah, it's right here. Ram's horn, trumpet.
And remember the trumpet, the shofar. The trumpet really was a ram's horn, and it was the sound that it made. It was to call the convocation or the assembly together for the sole purpose of giving honor and giving praise, giving glory to God, what He had commanded them to do. So that's what really Jubilee is. It's the shout it's to usher in after the sacrifice has been made. So when I said to you earlier about when Moses and Aaron did the sacrifice, and when they did the burnt offering for the Lord, and he prayed for the people, and he laid his hand on the people, one hand to the people, and the other hand on the scapegoat ram. And when he had finished praying, they ushered the goat out into the wilderness to never return. That's what we call that when sin goes away. We call this?
Oh.
It's too many times. You should know this by now. This what?
Expiation.
I mean, X means away from, away, expiation. And then this right here, when they offered the first, remember, when they offered the first ram to the Lord, that was propitiation. That was to get favorability and honor to God. He was favorable, in good standing with God. And then you send away the sin. So when Aaron prayed with their hands on blessing the people, and the other one on the goat, he was transferring. That's what we do for Christ. He transfers His righteousness to us, and He takes our sin and punishes and is punished for it. He lays His hand on the ram, and as an act of expiation, transference and expiation, transferring the sin from other people to the goat to be cast out into the wilderness of outer darkness. That's when they blew the shofar. That's the trumpet. When that was done, on the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur, the ram's horn was blown. In other words, it was the usher. Okay, the sin's going away out of the camp. Now it's time for the blessings of God to fall on the people. That's what Jubilee really was commemorates. So that's why when we talk about that 13th, 16th chapter of Leviticus, we don't usually talk about that was the ushering in on the day of Yom Kippur. There was the ushering in on that 14th day. I think it was after 14th day of it was the 10th day. The 10th day of the 7th month. That's when they would usher in, blow the horn, and usher in the blessing of the year of Jubilee. Now, as I said to you earlier, it's been said that Israel probably never kept the year of Jubilee. And as a matter of fact, it's pretty clear to me when you talk about what He does in the prophets, where he punishes Israel and talks about their sin, that they were not obedient to keep those commands. They were not obedient to keep the Sabbaths. They were not obedient to treat their neighbor as themselves, or the other neighbor as God had commanded them to love anyway. So therefore, that's why they were sent into captivity and punishment. Nevertheless, let's go to our first reading.
And it was Leviticus 16.
Yeah, okay. Let's look at that right quick. Leviticus 16.
Day of Atonement.
I start looking at verse 6 and we just read part of it. We ain't gonna read all that. We ain't gonna read all that. We just look at verse 6 and we read down to maybe verse 14 maybe. Amen. Leviticus 16 verse 6 rather. Aaron shall offer the bull as a sin offering for himself, and shall make atonement for himself and for his house. Then he shall take the 2 goats, set them before the Lord at the entrance of the tent of meeting, and Aaron shall cast lots over the 2 goats, one lot for the Lord and the other for Azazel. And Aaron shall present the goat on which the lot fell for the Lord, and use it for a sin offering. That's for the propitiation. But the goat on which the lot fell for Azazel shall be presented alive before the Lord to make atonement over it. That is the transference from the sin from the people to the goat. And then it may be sent away into the wilderness of Azazel. Let's go down further. Aaron shall present the bull as a sin offering for himself, and shall make atonement for himself and for his house. And he shall kill the bull and sin offering for himself, as a sin offering for himself. And he shall take the censer full of coals of fire from the altar before the Lord, and 2 handfuls of sweet incense beaten small, and he shall bring it inside the veil, and put the incense of the fire before the Lord. The cloud of the incense may cover the mercy seat that is over the testimony, and so that he does not die. And he shall take some of the blood of the bull, and sprinkle it with his finger on the front of the mercy seat, and the east side, and in front of the mercy seat. He shall sprinkle some blood. He shall sprinkle some of the blood with his finger 7 times. But you know, so also know he sprinkles on people later on. That's not we don't read all that. You get the point I'm saying. And then it was when like I said, when this ceremony was performed, and the goat was ushered out into the wilderness to not return. That's what Jesus says. It's for east from the west, never to return. That's when they would blow the shofar to usher in the year of Jubilee. Okay, let's look at Exodus 21, verse 2. Exodus 21, verse 2. When you and this is all the. Remember, there were lots of. When you make a covenant or when you make a policy, there's always a lot of sub bullets and sub paragraphs and sub whatever, little codices they put in there for this situation, that situation, blah blah blah. This is what some of these things are right here. When you look into how some of the particulars of the year of Jubilee, what he said that he wanted to do to usher in and to commemorate the year of Jubilee. When you buy a Hebrew slave, he shall serve you 6 years, and the 7th year he shall go out free for nothing. Means scot-free. We call scot-free. Not owing you anything. He's been indentured servant for whatever reason for 6 years. On the 7th year, you're just to forgive his debts. But remember now, this is just the Sabbath year. So Sabbath years, 7 Sabbath years makes the next year Jubilee. So that's why he always tells them, on the year of Jubilee, when you commemorate Jubilee, you basically got 2 years where the land is laying fallow. One for the Sabbath year, and because of the fulfillment of the Jubilee itself, another one for that. And God says, but not only that, he says, because if you do what I ask you to do, no, I will use the word ask, I mean tell, a command. That's right, we mean command. when you do that command you to do, if you're obedient, you'll see that everything will be all right. He's saying basically, if you see that 6-year fulfillment, that 7th year let it lay fallow, trust me, I will bless you. I'll provide all your needs. But we don't trust God, so we can't let him do that. And so then he says, but on top of that, but when it comes to Jubilee year, I'm going to bless with such a bumper crop those years that you cannot work for 2 years and still maintain enough for yourself, for the stranger in the land, for the animals, for the livestock, and for everything you need. But that's a lot of faith that we don't got, right?
Amen.
No, I should a little bit, but I can't trust you that much. And it's very clear that we as a church today, we as a people, we, to use Paul's term, the Israel of God today is no different than the Israel, national Israel was back then. We still don't trust God to supply our needs. We say we do, we try to a bit, but it comes to a point where we all falter. And that's okay, because God is a forgiving God, and God is a restoring God. But we need to always move forward, progressing. Making a little more progress to trust God a little bit more every day. Enough of that. Okay. Let's go to Exodus 23, verse 10.
Oh, Exodus 23.
It says, for 6 years you shall sow your land and gather in its yield. But the 7th year you shall let it rest and lie fallow. We use the word fallow. What does fallow mean? What's fallow?
It's when the land is broken up.
Rest.
But it's
Rest from
labor.
From bringing up the harvest.
bring up the harvest,
Reaping.
reaping.
Plowing.
Huh?
Plowing.
Okay. Because if you don't plow,
That's what's in the ground. The
So
ground is
basically,
broken up.
the land itself is laying there, soaking up the nutrients from what grows naturally and replenishing itself, restoring, resting up to get more nutrients for a bumper crop, a better crop, a sufficient crop, more the following year. It lies there. You don't even till it. You don't cut it. You do nothing to it. Just let it grow wild. I remember when I was at home, we had 3 acres. We still have it on the family. It's lying fallow right now, as a matter of fact. Because the one's working. But anyway, I wished it. So often would let our land lay fallow. And I'm not sure why my dad would do that, but it did. I don't think it was because of Jubilee though. I think it was because he just didn't have the time and energy, being a railroader, to do that, and have anyone want to do it for him. So sometimes it would lay fallow for until another year, someone would rent it out, or someone would work it for him, and he would do it himself, whatever. But anyway, when the land's laying fallow, there's nothing. There's no tillage, there's no plowing, there's no cutting, there's no nothing. What it just is what grows. And the thing of this is that when seeds grow naturally in a lot of places, it grows the kind of seeds that the ground needs to produce and to restore the nitrogen and the other nutrients it needs back in the soil to grow sufficiently for the following for the crop.
It says fallow is a plowed and unhollowed but left unsown for a period in order to restore its fertility as a part of a crop rotation or to avoid surplus production, uncultivated. So.
Yeah. See, sometimes the government does that even now. They pay farmers not to raise crops of corn or wheat because of the surplus, whatever, and they subsidize it and everything. But of course, I can almost guarantee that nowadays, when people they don't really lay fallow, because if you don't use it for soybeans or for cotton or for wheat, you use it for something else that you can make money off of. That's what we do today. I mean, but in the real time, in really biblical times, the land laid fallow, completely fallow. It wasn't tilled. Because when the crop was harvested for that year, the refuse, the seeds on top of the ground that was left for the poor, and to seed again. Not the same way you would seed as if you seeded it by plowing it up, but what naturally fell in its place, if it got in the soil, it would grow up, and produce. Maybe take root, may not take root. But anyway, was it Hebrews? Was it Exodus 10? No,
Exodus
23, verse 10. 23, verse 10. For 6 years you shall sow your land and gather in its yield. But the 7th year you shall let it rest and lie fallow, that the poor of your people may eat, and that they may, and what you leave, the wild beasts of the field may eat. You shall do likewise with your vineyards and your olive orchards. He's saying basically, so everything that you produce, all your crops. And see what he's saying? That he's trying again that the land is mine, and I want to feed not just you. I want to feed the poor, but I also want to feed the animals. See, God has provisions always built in for His plan. Okay.
Is that why we did this last Sunday's lesson when we were talking about when they left some for the poor? I can't remember what.
On the edges of the field.
Yeah. Gleaning. I was thinking of gleaning. Isn't it gleaning?
Yes.
Yeah. When you did.
Mean pardon me. When they did the harvest.
Yeah.
They left the gleanings at the edges of the crop.
For the poor. Okay.
Yes, for the poor. And for the animals.
Yeah.
What he's doing here is he's further clarifying what it's for. It's not changing what it said. It's just adding more for our understanding of what it was for. Not just for the people, for the poor, but for the animals as well. And let's look at Deuteronomy 15, 1 through 11. Then we'll go through the lesson. Deuteronomy 15. And this really talks about, in essence, the sabbatical year that goes into making up the year of Jubilee. Because remember now, I told you this, it's 7 times 749. And we know, you know math, but not do problem. So that's 749 if I remember correctly, right? Okay. So seven sabbatical years. The following year, after that, it becomes the year of Jubilee. So what Moses gives here is the instructions for the Sabbath year. He said, at the end of every 7 years, you shall grant a release. A release for the slave that you have indentured himself to you, for your neighbor or whomsoever has. Say, for example, if I had a bad year and I had lost my means to support myself, I was so destitute that I needed to sell myself to my neighbor as an indentured servant for a period of time to make money to feed my family or to pay off my debts. At the end of that, working for that person for 6 years, so in that 7th year, you would actually have released that person from those debts. But typically what happens is most people, when they work 6 years, they had made a dent because people cheat, one thing. But even sometimes, it's because sometimes you don't know how the crop's going to produce. You still, at the end of that 6 years, many times they were not paid off, so people kept them indentured to them, or kept them in slavery, or kept them in bondage, And it says, number 2, and this is the manner of the release. Every creditor shall release what he has lent to his neighbor. He shall not exact of his neighbor, his brother, because the Lord's release has been proclaimed. And the proclamation is the shofar. The proclamation is the blowing of the shofar. And it says, of the foreigner you may exact it, but wherever of yours is with your brother, your hand shall release. Verse 4. But there will be no poor among you. But there will be no poor among you. And it says, for the Lord will bless you with the land that the Lord your God is giving you for an inheritance to possess. If only you will strictly obey. What he says, if only you will strictly obey the voice of the Lord your God, being careful to do all that he has commanded that I command you this day, for the Lord your God will bless you, as he promised you, and you shall lend to many nations, but you shall not borrow. He says, you shall not borrow. You shall rule with many nations, but they shall not rule over you. Verse 7. If among you one of your brothers should become poor, if any of your towns within your land that the Lord your God is giving you, you shall not harden your heart or shut your hand against the poor brethren. But you shall open your hand to him and lend him sufficient for his needs, whatever it may be. Take care lest there be unworthy thoughts in your hearts, and say, the 7th year, the year of release is near, and you look grudgingly on the poor brother, and you give him nothing, and he cries to the Lord against you, and you be guilty of sin. You should give to him freely, and your heart should not be grudging when you give it to him. Because of this, the Lord your God will bless you in all the work and all that you do undertake. For there would never cease to be poor in the land. Therefore I command you, you shall open wide your hand to your brother, to the needy, to the poor in your land. So what he's saying here, basically, he's giving the rules how to institute that sabbatical year of release and the Jubilee. But he said to them, if you look at it carefully, there are provisions, say, for example, if our 3 years out from Jubilee, now see, 4 years already gone now, well 3 already gone, and then 3 more, say I'm 4 years into it. And then I got, in 3 years, I'm broke. I sent myself to dinners. But there are provisions whereby it was prorated. You still had to give a sufficient amount of time for those years that were left on Jubilee, and that's the reason why a lot of people didn't like Jubilee, because people would come in at a time when it was coming to near the end of the 7th year, and they figured they wouldn't have to work a sufficient amount to repay the debt. But there were provisions made to prorate that time you gave to make up for that Jubilee. But like I said, I don't know why, but as according to theologians, historians, Israel never ever kept really Jubilee. And you see why? Because people are stingy and we're greedy, and we know that when our finances were tied up into that land we planted seeds on, or whatever it may be, the lust that we're raising, we're not really fully ready to say, hey, John's do his stuff back in next year. I don't think I want to do that. And that's really, it's a matter of the heart, really. It's a matter of the heart of being obedience to God. And that's why he said earlier about the obedience piece. Be careful to do what I tell you to do, what I command you to do.
That's right.
Like you said, and the trusting God, that God is going to take care of you, even though you're not working the land.
Exactly.
Even though no one is working the land.
Right. And we don't trust him. Yeah. That's what it boils down to.
But that's what we do today.
We're
no different today.
No different.
We, like churches, sometimes, when economic time, they said the first place people stop giving when recession comes, they stop giving to the church.
Yeah.
They stop giving their tithes and offering. It's because they don't trust God enough that God's going to meet those needs, even though gas prices are skyrocketing, food prices are skyrocketing, things are all gone haywire. But the first place they stop giving is to God, is to the house of God.
Right. That's true. But I will tell you, according to studies, and you can even do studies today. And I know one of the most recent studies I saw was the Barnard group. They do a lot of studies on evangelicals, quote unquote evangelicals, and the church. And I think the last study that I saw about a year or two ago is that it says that approximately, I think it was 15%. So-called evangelical Christians give based on the tithe. That's a real miserable amount. It's a real poor amount. And all you gotta do is really look at churches where we worship. People don't tithe. People don't even try tithe.
That's right.
We don't even teach tithing as a rule. We mention it, but we don't teach it. We don't teach it the principles of it because we don't believe in it. And so we typically don't teach or preach what we don't believe in, or what makes us come up short, and that's the problem. But the point of it is that God, as I said to you earlier, not only for here but even for the church today, God has made provisions whereby if we were to be obedient, the blessings will indeed come.
Absolutely.
But we tend to not to trust the Lord for whatever reason. You know your own reason. I know my own reasons. Okay? So let's move to the next reading, then we'll be done and go to the lesson. Look at Jeremiah 34:14. Amen. 34:14.
You said what? 34:14 or 40?
34:14.
34.
Mhm.
Thank you.
At the end of 7 years, each of you must set free the fellow Hebrew who has been sold to you and has served you 6 years. You must set him free from your service. For your fathers did not listen to me. And see, this is what Jeremiah is saying. And see, Jeremiah is saying, now this is hundreds of years later that Moses had instituted Jubilee. And Jeremiah is saying to the people when they're in captivity, which is after 586, we know, and below. He's saying, your fathers, look at the verse, last part of 14. But your fathers did not listen to me, or incline their hearts to, or incline their ears to me. So that's the issue. We don't incline our ears to hear God, and don't incline our hearts to obey Him. Okay? Now let's go to the lesson.
I'm sorry. Can we just keep going? Because I was just
Sure.
down to 16, because it shows how we waffle.
Okay, and it says, verse 15 says, you recently repented and did what was right. See, he's recounting their history to them. He said, you've already been in captivity now. So you recently repented and did what was right in my eyes by proclaiming liberty each to his neighbor. And you made a covenant before me in the house that is called by my name. But when you turn around, then you turned around. You said, but then you turned around and profaned my name. And when each of you took back his male and female slaves, whom you had set free according to their desire, and you brought them into subjection to be your slaves. He says, when I start realizing how much money I'm going to lose after letting John go free, or how much crop ain't going to come in this year, oh, John, I think you still owe me. He said, you went back and you got him, now I'm back in captivity again. And that's, if you remember, that's why the Jewish law didn't allow usury, excessive interest on anything. It's because you didn't want to indenture someone for all their life. Because remember now, the purpose of Jubilee was to restore the land and the people and the whole creation. And it's also was to return to families. Remember when Joshua brought Israel out of Egypt and brought them to the promised land? He divided them into the tribe and gave them their portion of the land. When that land reverted back to those tribes, it went back to the original owners under that what that covenant was made. Back to that family, to their heads of those families, to restore and to have it for their people, for their tribe. And that's why you see when during the time when Ruth and Boaz and them were going, that's why Boaz does what he does with his uncle, whatever that man was, the other fellow was. It's because he's giving him the right to put it back where it really belongs. And if you don't make it right, then I'll buy it. There was nothing wrong with selling yourself into slavery if you were indentured, if you were in debt. But the provisions that God has set aside had to be followed to release you at that proper time. Even in that 7th year, or better yet, most certainly if you live to see it, the year of Jubilee. And if you were happy, if you were fortunate, should I say, you only saw really one Jubilee. Even though you may have gotten those many Sabbaths rest by release from your debt, but to get the full release of the land back to the original tribe, you may have been a 7-year-old child when it first happened. And then in 57, you saw my family rich again. Okay, let's look at Leviticus 25. Okay. Leviticus 25. The Lord spoke to Moses on Mount Sinai, saying, speak to the people of Israel and say to them, when you come into the land that I will give you, the land shall be kept. The land shall keep a Sabbath of the Lord. 6 years you shall sow your fields, and 6 years you shall prune your vineyards and gather its fruits. But in the 7th year there shall be a Sabbath of solemn rest for the land, a Sabbath to the Lord. You shall not sow your fields or prune your vineyards. You shall not reap what grows of itself in your harvest, or gather the grapes of your undressed vines. It shall be a year of solemn rest for the land. The Sabbath of the Lord of the land shall provide food for you, for yourself, and for your male and your female slaves, and for the hired worker and the sojourner who lives among you, and your cattle, and for the wild animals that are in your land. All its yield shall be for food. See, we're greedy. We're thinking, if that land lays fallow, how am I going to feed all the people? My slaves, myself, the sojourner in the land, and the wild animals too? This is how we think. We get ahead of God. God has provision how it's going to be, but we look at it in our limited view and think, well, that ain't going to work for me. And we want to take what God has provided for somebody else, something else, to use for ourselves. And it says, 8, you shall count 7 weeks of years, 7 times 7 years, so that the time of the 7 weeks of years you give for 49 years. Then you shall sound the loud trumpet, that's the shofar, yes, on the 10th day of the 7th month, on the Day of Atonement. You shall sound the trumpet throughout all your land, and you shall consecrate the 50th year and proclaim liberty throughout the land to all of its inhabitants. It shall be a jubilee for you, when each of you shall return to his property, and each of you shall return to his clan, to your family heads, his tribe heads. The 50th year shall be a jubilee for you. In it you shall neither sow nor reap what grows of itself, nor gather the grapes from the undressed vines. For it is a jubilee, it shall be holy to you. You may eat the produce of the field. So what you're saying, what I said to you earlier, is that what we see here is that Jubilee, Jubilee was really a period of 2 years in the land of lay fallow. Because at the end of the 7th year, the 49th year, that was 1 year. But God had promised them that in that 48th year, he would give them such a bumper crop of produce that it would last not only for that 7th year, for the Sabbath year, but for that 50th year as well. So you got 2 years where the land is laying fallow and rest. He says, and this is the part that I think that really, if you think about it, really gets a lot of us, is that he says when the land produces spontaneously of itself what's laying there, you are not to harvest that. So in other words, when you see those wild blackberries growing out there, when I was a kid, we used to get wild muscadines. I love them. We used to, grapes, muscadine grapes. And he said you need to harvest them, but you leave them for everybody. It's in your land, Dennis, but it ain't for you, Dennis. Mm-hmm. It's for everybody when the time comes. He says, and for the animals. And see, and that's the part that I think that we really don't see. How is God going to do that, and how am I going to get? Because it's about me. How am I going to get through and help what I need for my family and for me, but let these people go free and let all these crops go to waste and everything else? I don't think I can do that. That's really our attitude, and that's really the moon. It's our heart. It's our heart.
I believe sometimes if we just take time to follow God's instructions, we would be better off.
We would.
But sometimes we just don't want to follow God's instructions because we think we know better than
we do.
God.
And remember, that's the sin of life, part of life, is that we remember as I tell you, what we do when we sin against God, we're committing treason. It's an act of treason. When we act as if we're God, we are treasonous toward God. Because our hearts are wicked. The heart is inclined to be wicked. And in our fallen state, we are wicked. And even when we're redeemed, we ain't too good sometimes. I'm just telling like it is. You know, and y'all know telling the truth. Even those of us that are redeemed, I mean, truly redeemed, we still carry, Paul says, I still carry this what? This body of flesh. I have a constant reminder of how I want to do things my way and not God's way. Okay. Well,
they actually talk about, verses 18 through 22 actually talk about how
let's read first.
How we don't listen to God and those questions.
Okay. It says, therefore, 18, therefore you should do my statutes and keep my rules and perform them, and then you would dwell in the land securely. And that's the operative word right there, securely. See, we think we can't live securely unless we do it our way. But God said, if you do it my way, that's when your security comes right there. If you follow my rules, follow my provision, follow my statutes, he says the land will yield its fruit. He said, this is a promise from God. He said, the land will yield its fruit. You will, eat your fill and dwell in it securely. And if you say, what shall we eat in the 7th year, if we may not sow or gather in our crop? I will command my blessings on you in the 6th season. We're saying that's the bumper crop. He said, in that 6th year before the 7th year, I will make it so productive. You don't have to worry about that. Leave it to me. But as I said, we always got to do it our way. And it says, so that I would produce the crop sufficient for 3 years. What did it say? For 3 years. So you got the 2 years. And this is what he's saying basically. If it's the Jubilee year, you get the 7th year you got to do first. Then the Jubilee. He says, but then again, you got another year for the crop to grow again. He said, I'm going to produce so much basically where I have given you enough to fill over until you get to that 3rd year of harvest. And it says, when you sow in the 8th year, you will be eating some of the old crops. What it says? When you sow in the 8th, after your Jubilee's been celebrated, or Jubilee's celebrated, when you sow that year, he says, you will sow the 8th year, you will be eating some of the old crop, and you shall eat the old until the 9th year, when its crop arrives. That's the mighty God, and these are hard things for us as believers to. I mean, we make fun of the Jews for real, light of them, by how they were. But in all honesty, and even though we make light of ourselves as a church, it's not a laughing matter, because it really is a serious matter. Is that if we say that we are children of the cross, children of the promise, God is a promise keeper. God never fails to keep His promise, and if we are indeed redeemed, we should be trusting Him for all of our provisions like that. And because really what this is all about, actually this is the way I'm going to tell you, it's about rest, restoration, and redemption. Rest for the land, for the people, restoration, and redemption. Because remember what redemption is. Redemption is being set free. God is redeeming the people at this time. Just like Jesus Christ redeemed us by dying on the cross for us. It's redemption. He brought us out of the sin and market of slavery. He redeemed us, set us free. So that's what it's about. This is the ours. Rest, restoration, and redemption. That's what this is all about. And when we trust God as the promise keeper, God is always faithful to produce and to do even more than we even think He could do for us, as a matter of fact. But that's what we are in our lives, that we you know, the Bible says we live by faith, walk by faith, and not by sight. But we start looking at the figures in the book of what produced last year, and if we don't have about running the race, working the crops this year, it can be a lot less than that. It can be it's supposed to be in the black column. It's going to be in the red column. That's how we look at things. And we start looking in our mind the red column. We get scared, and we start trusting in our ability, start trusting in our will, and forget about who is the supplier of all. And that's why God said to him, because remember, He said, the land is mine. It's His. Any more comments? Questions? Sit down.
Amen. Amen.
Okay.